maybe we could just have a short hello by everyone, where he or she is speaking from and what is your field of activity. And so maybe I pick you because it's always a different order for everybody in the screen. And I start with our rapporteur, Elisabeth Nadeu. Please, Elisabeth.
Yes, hello. Well, thank you, everyone. So I'm Elisabeth Nadeu, and I'm working for the Rice Foundation. I'm the main researcher. We are a think tank based in Brussels, and I'll be your rapporteur in this session. And I have a personal interest in soil, and we're now at the Rice Foundation working on a report precisely on seeing how to move forward soil protection in the European Union. So I'm very interested also in the outcomes of this session.
So we're very lucky to have a real expert on the things we're discussing in here as rapporteur, and Elisabeth and I will try our best to summarize everything we'll say here, and especially what you will say here. And next in my line is Janis. Janis, you would like to have some words on your personal interest in the topic again?
Yeah.
Something maybe to add?
Yeah, you have heard quite a lot from me already. No, just you know that my function is my function is chairing the FFA and the Rice Foundation. I'm also one partner in Systemic, and one of the things which we are currently working on, and I will address it a bit in the closing, it's also how to scale up the whole idea which we are discussing about. So when we discuss those issues, personally, I'm interested because I think they are essential for our future, and I just try to stay connected with the topics which make sense and are impactful.
Yeah, thank you very much. Then next in my screen is Mats Rosenberg. Please, Mats, speak up.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Mats Rosenberg. So I am representing the Agora Carbon Alliance in this discussion. So the Agora Carbon Alliance is a collaboration platform which is focusing on decarbonizing agriculture. And our primary interest in this is how we can combine bringing quality carbon credits to the market and to the growers, and support transition to carbon-friendly farming in the context of the right kind of policy.
Mm-hmm. So also when your everyday business is also about carbonization and decarbonization, then it's really also in your DNA, as people say today, to talk about these issues. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Daniele Cesano, you're next in my. Thank you, Mark. That's you next on my screen.
Morning. My name is Daniele Cesano. I'm a farmer. I've been working with regenerative agriculture for about 20 years. I'm based in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. I'm also working for the Inter-American Development Bank. I'm helping them investing in the region in regenerative agriculture for a few of their funds. And I'm also an investor on my own. I'm the shareholder and co-founder of 3 companies that scale up regenerative agriculture in Latin America and in Europe.
Thank you very much. And before the session started, he told us that he is talking to us from Rio. I think it's really cool that we have really a global perspective in already this group here. Thank you, Daniele. We go over to Robert Erhard from Switzerland. Please, Robert.
Hi, everyone. Robert Erhard. I'm working with Nestlé and the head of our global fresh milk sourcing, and also lead within Nestlé the climate net zero journey for all livestock, so animal protein products. This includes also our work with regenerative agriculture. I wear 2 additional hats. One is as president of the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform. It's an organization of 149 food and beverage companies, which is driving towards sustainability and helping each other to move forwards at a pre-competitive level. And the second one is a member of the Comité National Suisse de la FAO. So it's a member of advising the government on matters towards currently very hot topic for the last 18 months, the Food System Summit, obviously.
Yeah, Yeah, it's quite obvious. Yeah, and I think nobody is not touched by all these topics and the big discussions around it. And yeah, I think regenerative agriculture, it's like in every mouth today. And some people think, oh, that's too much already. But on the other hand side, we call this session mainstreaming regenerative agriculture. So we should be pleased about that it really has an impact now. Thank you, Robert. Frank Bogovic. I don't know where the pronunciation is right, but from Slovenia.
Thanks, pronunciation was great, Franz Bogovic. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm a member of European Parliament. That's my second term. I'm in Agri and Regi Committee. Otherwise, my background is also agriculture. I was born on farm. I have farm. My brothers and also others are a lot involved in farming. But I was also Minister for Agriculture and Environment in Slovenia in 2012, 2013, when Janez Potočnik was commissioner in the European Commission. Thanks.
I think that was a very fruitful combination to have the commissioner from your homeland in Brussels. I think that's very handy for the minister in Slovenia then as well. Yeah. I love Slovenia, so I'm not very neutral on that point. Okay. Harry Smith is the next one on my screen. Where are you talking to us from, and what are your everyday business?
Yeah. Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Harry Smith. I'm working in Rabobank, a bank that finances about 80% of farmers in the Netherlands, and we finance globally food value chains. I'm part of the research team, and I've been involved also in developing what we call the soil index, which helps farmers assess the quality and the management of their soil. One message I would like to convey to kick off a bit the discussion in a later stage is we need a common language to measure sustainability or regenerative agriculture, and creating that common language is, I think, is challenge number one. Thank you.
Very good. I think that was just a very good paraphrase of what we have to do in this group, because we are really talking about the key principles, how we can put that into words. I mean, is a broad, everybody would agree on some core principles, but do they apply for every farm? Do we have to make some other steps? That's what we really want to talk about. Thank you on the contribution to you already. And next one in my line is Sarah Bibout. Please tell us about you.
Yes, it's Bibout, Sarah Bibout. I'm based in Maryland on the East Coast of the US. I'm representing the US Department of Agriculture with the huge agency. So within that, I'm part of the Agricultural Research Service. So we are one of the non-political parts of the USDA. Our job is to provide research data to those who need it, both in the general public and policymakers. And my role within the Agricultural Research Service is that I'm the National Program Leader for Sustainable Agricultural Systems. So we work across both crop and livestock and integrated crop livestock systems across the nation in a wide variety of different ecosystems. And we are working to improve the sustainability, both social, environmental, and economic.
Thank you, Sarah. So another one, really an expert on that, although you already mentioned as well policy and governance, which could be another group, but we picked well the people to specific topics here. Sometimes not like the home turf, to be clear, to be sure the discussion is really lively and not saying what we say all the day on the topics we know every day. So thank you, Sarah. And we have Ken Giller next in my line here, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. Pleased to meet you all. My name's Ken Giller. I work at the university with the unpronounceable name, Wageningen University in the Netherlands. I wear a number of hats in this discussion. I lead the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems. My passion is smallholder farming in Africa, and that's really where most of my work is focused. And I think it's really important that when we're discussing Europe, we also keep a reflection on the rest of the world and what doing things here mean for elsewhere as well. Thanks.
Yeah, we're all interlinked quite much, and even more and more also with technology, as Janis mentioned in his speech already beforehand. Yeah, totally agree. So, and last one here on my screen is Amirul Islam. Are you there? I have seen you before in the plenary, but I'm not sure if you can listen to us. Could you speak to us, please? I just can see the picture. Caroline, do you have any information about Amirul?
I haven't received anything, but I'm checking on it. So please go on, have a start.
Okay, so thank you, Caroline.
Heike, probably you forgot about me. I don't know if you see me on the screen.
You know why? Because it sometimes goes around, and now he's talking about
you have
my
a small screen. I have everybody.
It can't be anything before myself, you know. Like, Okay, sorry, please.
No, don't worry, don't worry.
Perfect.
So just introducing myself, Bart van de Wateren. I'm working for Nestlé, as you see with the logo behind me. I'm heading corporate communications and ESG engagement for Nestlé in Europe, Middle East, and North Africa. As part of these responsibilities, I'm also heading the European office in Brussels for Nestlé, with the engagement with the stakeholders here. From a personal perspective, I'm a farmer's son, and I have still a brother and a sister in farming. And I studied actually agronomy, but ended up more in the communication and stakeholder work. But here, I feel it's the right combination to be back to the origin, let's say. So looking forward to this discussion, and also great to have you all here. And meeting virtually with some of the friends that we have not seen for a very long time. So that's also very good.
Thank you very much, Bart. Yeah, I think having roots in agriculture is always somehow strong, and maybe it's, but just because we're all in this field, and we really try to mention this as well, because it means something else to have a familiar family background on that. And yeah, I see that. Okay, so we hope Amirul will join as well, not only his picture, that we have an Asianist perspective in here as well, but some of you also mentioned that they have a global perspective on the issues we discuss here, so I think we should manage that. I thought about how to start the discussion, and it's called about key principles of regenerative agriculture. And so I did a research, just like a Googling what is meant in the whole World Wide Web about what is regenerative agriculture, key principles and core principles, however they were called there. And I mean, it brings down mostly to 5 points. Also, Janis mentioned them in the speech already, and I just go through them. You all know them. It's don't disturb the soil, keep soil surface covered, keep living roots in the soil, grow diverse range of crops, bring grazing animals to the land or livestock or whatever, how it's called then. And some also said that understand the whole context of the farm you're working on, or farming in general. So this seems to be like the common sense of regenerative agriculture, but I would like to know now, and it doesn't always have to be via me, also discuss to each other, respond to each other, please feel free. Do you think these key principles that are very widespread, do they really cover what we are talking about? Is that really a thing to be used for us as well, as experts? Ken, you unmuted yourself. I don't know if on purpose.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to remute myself. I think.
Helpful to me.
Yeah, I think I got dragged into this discussion because I wrote a critical piece recently in which we discussed what is regenerative agriculture, because I think I felt quite confused. I heard about it first during a meeting. I sit on the Unilever Sustainable Sourcing Advisory Board, and I heard the term first there 2 or 3 years ago. And as an agronomist working in agriculture, I hadn't heard the term before. So it was something that was very alive, if you like, in the news and in public media, but not really in, if you like, in the academic world. And so I started to research what it is, and I found it actually, it's really quite confusing, because it seems to bring together a lot of people, it originates with the Rodale Institute in the United States in the 1980s in organic farming. For some people, it's very much organic farming. For some people, it's, if you like, a way of doing better within what we might call mainstream farming. In some ways, I think the confusion is very useful because it maybe stops us becoming too much part of, if you like, one particular doctrine, because I'm really disturbed actually by the way some people become very campaigning about stances in agriculture. And in some ways, if we can agree it's about trying to do better, then I think we can all be quite happy with the term. I think a degree of confusion and blurredness around the definition is actually very useful.
Mm-hmm. So it still has to be discussed, and people really have to put their awareness to it and not saying, oh yeah, we all know what it's all about. Okay.
Just one other point, and I'll hand over. I mean, when I teach a course on analyzing sustainability, how do we measure sustainability of farming systems? And I draw very much on a lot of the work that different companies do and others to discuss that. Mm-hmm. And to start off with, we ask everybody to write down what they think about sustainability. What is it? We make a word cloud, and then we move on. And we don't try and define it, because I think it should be a personal definition. And one thing I like very much working with Unilever is they have a sustainable agriculture code, and all of their suppliers have to work always to do better. So they never achieve a specific goal. They're always striving to do better. And I think that's very good. It's much better than saying, yes, now I'm sustainable, I can stop. Yeah, it's really about moving forward all the time. So I think that there's a really strong principle there of always trying to do things better. And I think every farmer wants to do that in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's very dynamic. So we have some hands here. Daniele Cesano, please, first.
So, well, thank you. Well, basically, I think if we start discussing the technicalities, we can discuss it forever, in my opinion. I think it to be very pragmatic. As a farmer, I'm paid based on volume and based on quality. But I'm not paid based on the environmental quality that I use in my farm to produce the food they produce. So one of the principles should be that farmers should be paid on the environmental quality that are you know, through which they are actually able to produce food. And this is probably the biggest distortion that we have in farming, is that farmers are paid based on quality and volume, but they're not based on the environmental quality through which, you know, they're able to produce food. So reshaping the way in which we price food, it's a key component in my opinion. That's one of the things. The other one is nutrient density, because if I have much more food is much more dense in terms of nutrients, why should I be sell for the same price as a conventional farmer that is lower food density compared to mine? So the way in which we are actually paying regenerative food has to be different.
So it's about a
principle. It should be a principle.
A pricing model put into the principles that they are linked to each other then. Okay.
Exactly. Quality of food and environmental quality. The density of food, density of nutrition, and environmental quality.
I mean, I think some of what you mentioned, the quality aspects of the price, I know this from Germany at least, that it is in the price. For example, like the milk, how much fat has it, how much proteins and stuff. So there's a difference in the price depending on the quality of the product you're bringing to the dairy or wherever you bring your stuff to. But the thing of the environmental issues caused by that, I think that would be then a difference. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Robert, you next, please.
Thank you. That's a very interesting start for me because both elements nicely fit together. I started off in my studies and writing my thesis on a tool called, was one of the first sustainability tools called the Response-Inducing Sustainability Evaluation Tool from the University of Bern. And it basically just gave you an overview, but it also showed you the dynamics, the missing conversation that sustainability is not a definite outcome. It's continuous evolving, it's continuous improvement, but you you pull on one string and it changes all the other elements that go along with it. And it has to end up for the farmer, and the farmer has to make a living wage, living income for his employees too. What has fundamentally changed with climate, and I do want to bring this in at this point in time, is the way we have been obsessed with logos on I am good. And I keep on telling this in Nestlé internally, and I have a lot of colleagues who believe the same thing. If we keep on putting up logos, you know, buy this product and it's all fine, we keep on bullshitting them. Sorry for using that word, but that's literally what it is, because what we end up doing is, you know, go find out one black sheep and then just tear the whole thing down again, okay? It doesn't work that way. And it's a continuous evolution, as was nicely pointed out by Ken. Now, climate has changed that dynamic by saying, we're not going to say, what is this practice is good, this practice is bad. Shut off your brain, just go farm, just do what I say. We don't care about your environment, and that's it. And that's a problem of where we've been coming from. What we're going towards now with Regen Ag and climate is there are 100 ways, to use an old terminology, that lead to Rome. Some may be faster, some may be longer, some may be more adventurous. But in the end, it's the outcome that matters. And that has two fundamental principles behind it. One, farmers are going to have to share more data as companies like Nestlé's and Unilever's of this world are going to have to become more radically transparent towards the consumers. And the consumers don't want to know the details. They just want to know that we're doing the right thing. And then to the last point that was brought now by Daniele, yes, there will be an internalization of costs and changes of cost structures. We've been very open, and so have others. And by the way, that's how the US Net Zero Initiative got started in a very heated debate 2 years ago in the US. Actually, there were 4 or 5 meetings. I was very frequently US that year with and some of the other colleagues at Nestlé as well, when we had that discussion in dairy. And the outcome was the US dairy industry has to commit to go to climate neutrality. And that could only happen when they knew that we will be looking and purchasing and shifting volumes based on how and where they are at. But at the same time, you will also have seen our announcement of this 3.2 billion investment into agriculture and supply chains, because if we don't co-fund and shift this, now that may go through premiums and others, but in the end, those are the dynamics that will come. So Daniela, your ask that you're having, it may not be today directly, but it is coming very soon, and these fundamental changes are starting to take place.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting also what you mentioned about the logos and stuff, because many startups just going down that pathway because they say, okay, we have to do marketing around it and we have to tell exactly people to, you don't have to care about everything, we take care of you. One of the startups, they really communicate like, you eat, we care. So it's really what you just mentioned, put in a nutshell. And I think, yeah, and also Paulo mentioned the greenwashing. Okay, he was talking about the EU politics, but still, it's always just around the corner, this thing to say, oh, you're all greenwashing, you're all, when one thing is against the whole thing. Yeah, that's interesting. And I'm sure
and it means that farmers, however, have to really think about what is the future model for their farm. And there is no handbook, just go do that. That puts a lot more pressure on them as well. And the professionalism we demand from farmers, basically as a human community, as this planet is going up by a lot as well.
So I don't want to interrupt all the other people who just raised their hands, Harry, Frank, and Daniele, but I wanted to then have in the back of our minds maybe the question we have here about the key principles. Maybe it's not really applicable because what you said just now, it's very dynamic and everything. So maybe we should change that, but just keep in mind. Harry, that's your turn now, please.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'd like to share a bit our experience with the soil index. And we are a bank in the Netherlands. We finance farmers. We are quite dominant in financing farmers in the Netherlands. And we wanted to link impact investors like pension funds to farmers that are front runners in the field of sustainability. In order to convince impact investors that part of our portfolio is extra sustainable, we need to have data and we need to be able to provide proof of the sustainability performance of farmers. And that's why we developed this soil index, so that we could give a credit interest rebate to farmers because those impact investors want to accept a lower return because they have impact. But convincing farmers to apply such a soil index only to get an interest rebate is not convincing enough. It's not enough money for the farmer that only a bit of a rebate on interest on a loan. In our view, that index has to be a management tool for a farmer to optimize his performance, so an agronomic purpose. And it should also be a tool for others to measure sustainabilities. For example, for a potato processor or for a dairy processing company like in the Netherlands, Friesland Campina, that can say, well, our farmers have better scores, for example, on the soil index, and therefore the milk is more sustainably produced. So that from a farmer point of view, he's adding up benefits with one index, with one definition of sustainability. And you need that in order to get the farmers moving. And only we as a bank can get the farmers moving. The whole value chain has to apply a same kind of, provide same kind of direction, same kind of effort, same kind of ways of measuring in order to get the farmers moving. So that's why I underline that we need one way of measuring sustainability, and there has to be more than just getting a logo of being more sustainable. It also has to be interesting for a farmer in his operations. It has to help him optimize his own operations, next to getting all these bonuses from, for example, a bank or from a processor or whatever.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah.
Sorry. So you would state that we need principles to, for example, then give extra bonuses to the farmers doing in that direction, doing farming in that direction. We would like to have them.
Yeah, well, you need to measure what the direction is and what kind of targets he can achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bonuses will come from various sources, from his financier, from his potato, the one that's buying his potato, the one that's buying his milk. And there should be a bonus in the form of a better yield or a better agronomic practice that provides benefits to the farmer himself as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would like to remind us all on the 3 questions. Caroline put them again in the chat because we're still covering the first question. What are the key principles? Maybe the hands risen now by Frank, Daniele, and Janet address this, but I really would like to help also Elisabeth, our rapporteur, to put down some notes on that. What can we say about the principles? Do the principles I put in the beforehand, like we see it all over the internet, like the 5 principles, do they apply, or do we say no, it has to be dynamic? It's not like you fulfill these principles and yeah, I mean, these are still very broad. So when it's said that there should be cattle grazing on the fields, is that enough that there's 1 cattle, or what? I mean, is it applicable in that way, or could we agree on something to really write down what can be the key principles of regenerative agriculture? A short sentence on that. Maybe Mats?
There we go. I'm probably on, not muted anymore. Can you hear me? I was just listening to the discussion here and the question asked, and there is a great report which the IUCN published last year, which basically made a fairly simple comparison of regenerative practices which are applied across the globe, and try to look at the sort of commonalities across them. And the conclusion seems to be boiling down to what largely is being denominated as conservation ag practices. So crop rotation, having the right crop rotation, keeping the soil covered or using the use of cover crops, and the no-till practices. And it's part of what you introduced in the beginning. Maybe this is a starting point for a discussion, trying to boil down to which are sort of the main areas and main directions in which will help define a way forward for regenerative ag implementation.
So you would argue pro these broad principles. Maybe Robert mentioned that there were big discussions in the US and between US and Europe and everything. So I would like to take in, sorry for the hands raised, I have seen you. Sarah, maybe you could add what you made in the US. Did you had really put on paper principles?
So as Ken alluded to, regenerative agriculture has at various times in the last few decades been used by different groups in the US in different ways. Some people really do tie it very closely to organic farming, and there's a whole group of people who want it to mean better than organic farming, beyond organic farming. And then there's some people who want to broaden it out to non-organic farmers and say anybody who's basically using soil health practices can be considered doing regenerative agriculture. What I see in the principles that you have outlined is they're basically aligned around soil health. So you could say that we are regenerating soil health. That is the focus of this. I'm a soil scientist by training. I am comfortable with that. I think soil is the key to sustainable agriculture, along with a number of other things. But so I don't have any problem with the key principles as you've outlined them. Mm-hmm. I kind of agree with Ken that we're never going to get to a consensus definition of it, and that's probably okay. So that's from the US perspective.
Okay, I take my role as moderator to put this down now and to talk with Elizabeth about it, that maybe we have the principles as you can find them, and also Harry mentioned something in the chat about how Rabobank handles this, and maybe we could make a merge of this, and also putting in that it's not a stable thing, yes, you reached it, now you're fine and forever. But it's very dynamic, and it has to be re-examined, re-evaluated maybe, and certain rhythms, I don't know, on a regular basis, of course, yeah. So I would like to take this as the point for our first question on the key principles, and the question to the ones I already know, 6 people raising their hands. So the second question, and I hope that the raised hands are also dealing on that. How do we build a consensus around them? Is there anything getting in the way? I think it's not too far away of the first question about the key principles. So now it's Frank's turn, please, Frank.
Thanks. As we speak, I think that it's not easy. There is big confusion, and to reach better soil management, better agriculture practices, I think there must be a combination of different measures. And I will connect this with CAP, which, as you know, was on trialogue accepted last weekend. But I think that first here is the basic policies, like we have now also farm to fork strategy. We have other these strategies inside Green Deal, but then there are CAP in which we have some conditions, which practices are allowed, what is not allowed, and then in this eco scheme we have some subsidies for good practices in for different fields. And the third pillar policies then to support the third important pillar are consumers. At consumers we have the problem because they can choose. If we compare this with renewable energy, usually you get the bill the costs of renewable energy, but here consumers can choose. So it's very important also public opinion, and as we do, to speak about this and inform this. And from my side in CAP there are some very good things which are connected with soil, with air pollution, other. And for me it's also very important support of small farmers, it's important because usually you pay also eco service, not the pay for food or something. So I think it's possible. And for me, it's also very important support of young farmers, because for these new methods, you need a lot of knowledge, and usually this is connected. So I think in this combination, we must find common language. What is regenerative? What is organic? I think it's important which practices we support and go in the right direction, either quality of soil, water, air, biodiversity, or other things. And combination of support, how to help farmers and to put give them direction in which direction they must go. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if we have a clear, or at least enough blurry definition of regenerative agriculture, then hopefully it's a benefit to many things. For example, also the CAP and everything, because it's in everything. I mean, it's interlinked to everything else. And in Germany, it's kind of seen that regenerative agriculture is in between conventional, like the mainstreaming agriculture, and ecological agriculture. So it seems to be a third way. So some people, yeah, they make this now as a stand. But I don't want to go too deep myself. But the next one, Daniele, is it still what you wanted to say? Is it still okay now, or did you already? Because I saw there's some discussion in the chat going on as well.
Yeah. So just to make it, So I think one thing that is coming up is that, you know, the Rodale Institute, they came up with the first definition, and then this is applying the golden rule. But, you know, I mean, regenerative agriculture in North America and in Europe is completely different from tropical countries. So, for example, this thing about integrating animal, the Amazon doesn't have herds. You know, well, Europe has prairies and grasslands. Like in the US, you have grasslands, which makes sense to include animals in Africa, in savanna, because you have herds. But does it make sense to include herds in animals in the Amazon or like in tropical rainforest? That's a destruction of the biome. It doesn't make sense. There you have to produce cocoa, you have to produce coffee, you have to produce palm oil in a sustainable way. So we shouldn't make the same mistake that we did in the past, like the US and Europe. They define what regenerative agriculture is, and then everybody's going to follow. The same mistake that we've done in the past, and is exactly exporting the concept of agriculture to tropical countries that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So this should be a principle. Let's not buy what other countries are saying. We say it should be biome specific. First point. The second point, if you start seeing the way in which agriculture has evolved, you have seen that agriculture, what became a business, is not producing food, is selling inputs. So one of the reasons why we got to the point where we're now is because the real business agriculture has been selling chemicals. So instead of nurturing people, the whole industry evolved as a way where I am the chemical producer, I'm the chemical industry, I'm financing the farmer, and I'm buying your product. So, you know, so you're basically building dependence on the chemical industry. Now, you see all the chemical industry now, they are talking about carbon, we have to sequester carbon, and then they say, now I have the new solution, and they are building packages of inputs in different ways to build the same scheme over and over again, but in a new way. So one of the principles is that the key actor of agriculture is the farmer, and selling inputs and selling services to farmer is not really the most important part. Is producing food. So one of the principles, and I don't have still an answer to that, is that one of the principles is really to strengthen farmer and not to strengthen the industry that rotates around the farmer and that consider the farmer as the customer of the industry. And this should be also a principle, and I don't know how to put it, but this I think is a very important point, in my opinion. So there are 2 points I did.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Also, we don't have to even look at the tropical parts of the world, but also Caroline and I, we discussed beforehand that already in Germany or in Europe, we have this, you mentioned the grasslands, and in the grasslands, you don't have to think about covering the soil and everything because it's covered by grass. So already there we have to have principles which can be applied on very different kinds of farms, very different kinds of farming. And the second point, I would like to give Janitz now the microphone, so to speak. But the second point, why we circled around the industry, is not really clear to me. Maybe we could discuss that later on, because we're talking now about how to build a consensus around them. And then I think that's exactly the thing to do now. But first, Janitz.
Thank you. I will speak more from the point of view of the policymaker. So what a policymaker would need from us, or if you want, from what we are discussing. It's any concept is useful. Of course, it is leading to some targets which we are setting ourselves. So we need some agreement about what targets this concept is actually bringing us closer. And while blur might be useful for the policymaker, it's actually a nightmare, because what we are struggling constantly is how to build the trust to get everybody on board. And the last thing which we need is that some people abuse the concept in a way that then also the rest are losing the trust. And then, of course, we fail with the policy making. So I do believe that we need some kind of agreement about what belongs to what is regenerative agriculture. And if the principles are dynamic, that is not preventing us of doing that. You can always come back and you can always develop those kind of principles, but you need to have some kind of agreement. And of course, I do acknowledge that there are regional differences, and these things need to be taken into account. So where Harry was talking about soil index, because Harry, it's pretty much, or Robobank, it's pretty much in the same position as it's a policymaker. So they need a kind of measurement around which they can then support or not support the things, which would actually bring some of the benefits to those who are actively engaging into transformation, because that's our job, that we get and engage as many as possible to something which we have set as targets, which we have to reach. So I think, which is bringing me to the second question, which you have actually asked, and Daniela has actually started to talk about. It's very much about the governance, how we would reach there. What are the steps, and how not to, as he was saying, how not to make it emerging only from part of the world, but will be something which will be where the ownership would be felt, and where we would have a kind of understanding. And that's why I think the debate in UNFSS, it's the proper place that we organize that kind of a debate. When it comes to, and that's the final comment, to again, Daniela was talking about, it would be better to pay environmental quality than the volume. And as we know, organic food, which we are buying, some of us, unfortunately, the real problem there, it is that not many can afford it, because we like, those who can, we like to pay the farmers for different quality and more healthy food, but not many can afford it. And that's what led me in you remember in my opening to this social part of the story, which I firmly believe that it's a very critical part of any agricultural transformation. And for me, that's why it is so important how public money is used. And I don't want to go into the European debate and the common agriculture policy, and but I'm firmly convinced that we have missed the opportunity. I think that while it's true that a lot of those efforts were done, that the things would be connected, but for me, 100% of the money would need to be used for that transition. And that is far from the case. And public money needs to be used for public purposes. And this is the utmost necessary public purpose which we have at this stage.
Thank you, Janitz, on that. I think also that we should put the principles, like we need them to make the policy, and as well Robert said in the chat, that we need maybe a threshold to call farm regenerative, so that we have at least something in our hands to say this is fine, this is not with the concept, so to speak, and to make a decision in between, and then to also decide where the money, as Janitz put, the public money goes to or not. Just to remind you, at 4:15 we need to close this section, and so we need to do some work until then. And so I think we're just in the midst of the discussion also to build how we build a consensus around it. And we have mentioned some hinderings on that we mentioned that maybe not everybody has the money to this. We had public money not going to these channels, not enough at least. We also mentioned the small farms by Frank. So we have different aspects on this consensus, how is this built or not built. So Bart was raising his hand very long time already, so this is now your turn.
No worries. It was really interesting to
yeah,
to
but
hear,
let me add something what we should focus on the next bit more than 15 minutes, because what are the next steps for securing alignment amongst the key stakeholders? I think we're just in the midst of that, just to put this question in our middle on the table.
No, and exactly, I wanted to focus on that one and to start from there. If you think about the definition of regeneration, we think it's environmental, but it's actually not at all. It includes the environmental aspects, but regeneration is also the social aspect, the economic aspect. So all these different elements are in a more holistic definition of regeneration. So it means that somehow in our definition and criteria, we need to reflect also notably the social case. And I think Daniele, but also Robert, you've mentioned the incomes and so on of the farmer, the livelihood. So I think, and when we speak about this, we need to define also, or at least make a link, and that brings us also on the consensus. If today, and when I speak, and for those who are following what's happening in Brussels these days, we are talking about a code of conduct on better practices that should help for sustainable food systems. We are really finding ourselves in these discussions, and there will be a legislation later on that should complement the CAP, and there should obviously be links, and we are equally a bit frustrated, Jan, is like you, that maybe we could have achieved much more, but okay, we have what we have. What we feel there is that without a definition that purely focuses on environmental criteria, which are the right ones, what you were discussing, with all the flexibility and some of the KPIs that will be needed to not to have a kind of greenwashing or consumer confidence, we need a social component there. And the farming organizations are really feeling at this stage that when we talk about regenerative agriculture, we are just pushing this on their shoulders, and that were really all the discussions over the last months when we talked about regenerative agriculture. Okay, nice, you put this on our shoulders, but yeah, what is in for us? How can we onboard it? And I think the broadening the definitions beyond the environmental aspect, linking it to the business case for the farmer, to the livelihood of the farmer, notably also when we think about those in the global supply chains on top of the European ones that we're discussing in the CAP, is key in my view, and should be the trust builder with agricultural organizations.
So you think that these are some of the main barriers, because you would like to identify really the main barriers to proceed, to step forward in this process? Would you say it's also the lack of acceptance by the farmers because they feel like, oh, something else put on our shoulders?
It is understood, but not accepted that they can. It is felt like we leave them alone. We push. The companies are saying, the governments are saying, and no, you need to do. And they are. And let's remember, I come from this farming background. Not all of them are so professional that we would wish them to be. Many are extremely professional, know extremely well, but maybe they are not fully kind of having all the tools in place to make this transition. And when you come with these things, you need to come with not just practices or KPIs, but you need to come with a whole package, which is holistic and which is also serving their family and their needs.
So also education you would like to add? Maybe is education one of the main areas?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Entrepreneurship, education, incentives. So.
So a whole bunch of things. Thank you. Ken, you're next. And I see the discussion in the chat, and I think it's very good because all will come into our report back to the UN. So it's not only discussion, also in the chat. So feel free.
I desperately want to say a couple of things. One is that we have to recognize local context, and we talked about geographies, and I think that's very true, but also the particular farming systems, the goals, whether we're dealing with smallholders, because you're talking here about definitions, which certainly for many of the companies like Nestle, Unilever, they source from millions and millions of smallholders throughout the world. And if they're going to impose, if you like, or have a new set of rules, these have to be rules which can fit for everybody. I think we can have some goals like sustaining and improving biodiversity, sustaining and improving soil health or soil quality. I'm really worried about some of the push to reduce inputs because it's far too simplistic. We've got, if we talk about agrochemicals, we have nutrients, which are environmentally benign if used properly, and we have pesticides which are designed to kill things. And for one thing, we need to make a big distinction between nutrients, I think, and pesticides. And in many situations that I work in Africa, you cannot do sustainable agriculture without increasing the inputs of nutrients because the soils are so depleted. So to say we have to reduce inputs everywhere, which is being pushed very much on these sort of general principles, I think is nonsense. It depends so much on your starting point in terms of a journey of where are you starting and where are you heading. And I think this idea about having directionality, we want to move to something better, but we start in different places is really important. And I think we can have principles which underlie general goals, which is, about doing things better, and we can define that. And many of the principles you say are appropriate in some places, as Daniela is saying, but not in others. One last example would be conservation tillage, zero tillage. In many places, that means increasing the use of herbicides. So some of these aims and objectives and principles, they're contradictory as well. If you don't use herbicides, you need to till to control weeds. I mean, let's be realistic about this. It sounds great on paper. We do all of this, but many of the things that are being proposed are totally contradictory.
So you would like to say that one of the main barriers are also that we have such a diverse landscape and such a diverse depletion of the soil, so that we have to take first an evaluation, so to speak, on a very simple level as well, to have a look what is needed in this particular space. But how to put this, I mean, you're from academia as well, how to put this in a definition or a principle.
General goals, but we have locally tailored solutions, locally tailored options. And I think it's absolutely fundamental as there as a line, And going back to Janet's point about the social and the economic aspects, for many poorer farmers, these are absolutely their livelihoods. And we have to make sure that then they are allowed to grow their production. And we're not going in and putting in rules that saying you're not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that. Or we end up excluding people from value chains so that where they need to earn their living income, but we push them out because they're too poor to make a contribution. So I think there are very broad social aspects. If we're too focused on designing things that will just work in Europe, we'll end up having a very negative effect globally by doing that. And I feel rather passionately about that. So.
And that's really cool, I'd say. I think Daniele has also to add something passionate about that point, I guess.
Yes, well, you see, that's the thing, and I agree. I definitely agree with Ken that, you know, we need to have inputs, especially when we have a degraded land. But the key thing is the following: if you go and work in tropical countries, the weathering, the like non-conservation practices, and heavy rainfall, sun, and the weathering processes really depleted the soil of minerals and nutrients. And one of the things that we're seeing today, for example, in Brazil, is booming, is the use of remineralizers, so rock dust. And rock dust, the conventional agricultural industry never put forward, never proposed the use of rock dust remineralizers. Why? Because remineralizers are local inputs, are local caves, is a byproduct of the mining industry, which is something that the conventional agricultural system cannot really get all of it, because it's too much, it's too complex, too diverse. So, and I think finding this local solution definitely is key. So my point is together with Ken, is like, what is the right combination of local conditions? Also, for example, weeding. We can use cover crops. We are developing here in Brazil system where eventually you decrease substantially the use of herbicides using cover crops. You can do that in many different ways.
Locally tailored solutions. Yeah, I mean, I worked most of my career on nitrogen fixation. Yeah, legumes, brilliant, but they can't create phosphorus. And I mean, so we have to be sensible about, sometimes we need fertilizers, mineral fertilizers as well, where rock dusts really don't work. So I mean, I think locally tailored solutions, like you're suggesting, Danielle, can work in places, but I think we have to be careful not to be too prescriptive. That's my worry.
I mean, that's the thing, what just Janet's mentioned, and also Robert in the chat, that somehow when we would like to have some principles, or to be able to put public money into things, we have to define the things, at least somehow. I think, could we agree on that? And I mean, maybe we could define thresholds, or we could define the goals, what you mentioned, Ken. Excuse me. And how could we put that in words? Or how would you make a law out of that? Or how can we put some specific on paper? I think that would help Elisabeth and me quite much to bring specific outcomes from this group. Yeah, Robert.
Right. I'd take an approach where we say, when agriculture and a farmer can show that he is improving his soil health, enriching his biodiversity, and having a better watershed management approach, while also ensuring his livelihood and income, he is becoming more and more regenerative. If it's a threshold or whatever we want to call it, but it is moving in the direction of what is right? And I think if you can show that continuous improvement of that, then the farmer, whatever he's doing, even if it's the long run, maybe if he's taking the scenic route rather than the shortest one, for whatever reason it may be, lack of cash or whatever, it is the right thing that he's doing. And that is what it fundamentally boils down to, in my opinion.
So it's about the process, or about the progress that is made, that the relative step forward then, is it right?
The continuous improvement of key metrics, and I called out the nature ones and livelihoods in this.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mats also mentioned something in the chat here: optimization and localization of inputs together with grower education and how best to manage the transition phase. That's also very interesting, yeah. And understand the overall operational farm benefit seems to be a winning concept to drive adoption. Question mark. Why a question mark there, Mats?
To me, this seems to be the winning concept, combining all of this together. And just want to put it out here and open when we have a lot of experts. Is this what it takes? Certainly, at least from our market reviews, it does seem that there's plenty of countries in Europe where regenerative farming practices or conservation ag has been tested, but growers have sort of fallen off the cliff during the first 1 to 3 years of adoption, just because they have not been advised enough. They haven't had access to experts on helping them throughout the transition journey. And also they have been surprised by the possible sort of fallbacks in the first years, slightly reduced yields, more weed pressure, but all of this actually is what then is expected to disappear after the first 3 to 5 years. So hence my belief that getting that combination right is what it takes to get adoption of regenerative or conservation practices.
Harry, would you like to answer on that? How do your principles apply, and is it really cool to handle with the farmers?
Yeah, well, if we look at the soil index that I talked about earlier, it brings the science to the farm by setting kind of ideal scores for each different soil type. In the Netherlands, we have clay soils, we have sandy soils, and we have peaty soils. And in the soil index, the ideal score is different for each of these different kind of soils. So it underlines the importance of localizing targets and then the index gives a distance to target, so that helps him to get a feel for the potential to improve his practices. And and then his agronomic advisor, which we are not as a bank, but his agronomic advisor should help him improve, close the target, and move towards the target. But the localization of targets, that's a key issue as well in our soil index, and you need science to realize that. And as such a tool can be a perfect bridge for bringing science to the farm as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Harry. Maybe also read that we have 5 minutes left. There will be a 2 minutes countdown as well. I ask you to please stay in here because we will proceed it automatically when time is over. So don't click on it, but stay here until the very end. Janitz, I've seen your hand, but you have something short, because I think
no, mine is still up from before. Don't worry.
Okay, okay, great, thanks. Daniele, would you like to say something? Your hand's up already, still.
I think this is something important, and I've seen agroforestry projects, farmers. They've been doing agroforestry for 30 years. They are cocoa farmers. They don't put one single external input in their farm, because over 30 years of really dynamic agroforestry, they've been able to cycling the nutrients inside the farm to such a level that what they're exporting is a very tiny little amount compared to the amount of biomass and nutrients that their forest is producing inside, which means that ultimately the goal is reducing to the minimum or even completely skip the use of external input. And this is feasible and it is possible to be done. And of course, it's going to take 20 or 30 years. And there are very few farmers in the world today that are able to do that, but they show that it is possible to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this would be one specific point. Because in the time left, I would ask you, please all tell me one thing, one step that should be taken by each person in here. So one step, and please shortly, otherwise somebody will cut off and we don't want to have that. So again, in my order here, Janitz, you're the first one. One step that is made to go forward.
I think I have nothing to add.
Okay. Next one, Mats. Maybe you would like to emphasize one of what you said before.
I didn't catch the question actually. What you said there.
Once everybody should say, please, one step. How we could take one step forward, one step by each participant in here.
Okay, one step forward to me, as I put it in the chat. For me, absolute key for any target for regenerative practices, it's that it has to deliver farm operational benefits.
Okay, thank you. Daniele, you already mentioned or at least we're targeting no input. Then Robert.
One sentence would be, let's align as an industry how we measure what regeneration is, all get behind it and not duplicate our work, but get our acts together so that we can all progress jointly and quickly. We don't have time to waste on butting around.
I think we agree on that. Thank you. It's Frank, please. One step, a short one. Is it working? I go to Harry and then I come back to you, Frank. Harry, would you like to add one step? Not working anymore?
I would still say alignment. Alignment is key to align stakeholders around the farmers on the goal.
Thank you. Sarah, it's your turn. Quickly.
One step forward, I think, is going to be continuing to measure what we think is an improvement and show whether or not the things that we're promoting are actually improving the system.
Thank you very much. Now, Frank, I think your microphone's working now.
Yeah. Combination of measures and collaboration between policy makers, public support, and consumers and public opinion.
Thank you, Frank. We have 20 minutes left, 20 seconds left. Ken, 10 to you and 10 to Bart.
Really quickly, and think of integrated farms and farming systems and farm and not just individual commodities.